I don't.
Well, hello. It's 2 o'clock, and we are going to start in about 1 more minute. We'll give a few more people to come on, and we'll be able to have our Facebook Live with Associate Vice Chancellor Guy Nicolette and Professor Dacher Keltner. Well, all right. Well, welcome. Welcome to the Cal Parents and Families Facebook Live with Associate Vice Chancellor Guy Nicolette and our esteemed colleague, Professor Dacher Keltner. Today's edition is titled Student Health and Wellness. And so we'd like to get right into it. My name is David Ortega, and I'm the Director of Parent Services and Communications. And I'm also a former Cal Parent student who graduated in 2018, and I'm happy to bring this to you because I think it's very important this day and age. And I think right now I'd like to have my esteemed colleagues introduce themselves.
Thanks, David. I guess I'll just jump in and go first. We didn't talk about that before enough. My name is Guy Nicolette. I'm the Assistant Vice Chancellor for University Health. I'm trained as a sports medicine physician, and I started here at Cal in 2019, about a year before the pandemic started. I'll bounce it to Dacher, and maybe we can kind of go back and forth about kind of opening statements.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Dacher Keltner. I have been at UC Berkeley for 25 years as a professor in psychology, help run the Greater Good Science Center with its millions of readers, getting the latest on well-being and wellness, and also a Cal parent. My daughter Serafina is a senior, and my daughter Natalie graduated a couple years ago and is doing really well, and huge fans of the university.
Well, I think I'll just start that it strikes me that one of the reasons why I left a previous position and came to Cal was the emphasis on health, all aspects of health. And this campus is uniquely positioned in the UC system, but also across the nation. There just aren't that many health services that have the robust platform of services that we have, as well as the national standing in some of the care that's offered. We were one of the first, well before my time, to focus on care of transgendered individuals. We're one of the first ones to focus on collaborative care, meaning embedding mental health clinicians in the primary care world, and hopefully vice versa. So that's one of the things that attracted me about this position and this campus. I'll just quickly say that from the physical health side, we have a robust array of kind of physical health services, like I mentioned, primary care, ongoing care for urgent care. We have health coaching. We have, a fairly advanced system of, like I mentioned, integration of the physical health and the mental health. And I wanted to kind of highlight a couple things. One is there's some links that can show you, what we care about. So there's a strategic plan that we've published for the world to see. Those are the things that we care about and are focusing on in the next 5 years. I mentioned the mental health. We have a counseling and psychologic services that has counselors from all lived experience backgrounds, race and ethnic. We have a wide diversity of race and ethnicity for students that want to be seen by somebody that has lived some of their experiences, or can identify in a lot of ways with kind of their intersectional identities. We embarked last year on transforming our mental health care because, like many parents, you've likely heard that college campuses around the nation are struggling to keep up with demand. And part of that is there is an increase in demand, but the other part is we're using very old models of care. And to be blunt, not everybody needs a 1-hour intake assessment and let's talk about your childhood and those kinds of things. I'm being a little facetious, but not everybody needs that. Some people really need help with a specific targeted thing. And so if you Google Stepped Care 2.0, we have one of the international experts here on that model and are transforming our care. And from a holistic wellness, we really are thinking about the campus and the built environment in a way that we hadn't before, that the built environment truly affects people's health. It affects their state of mind, and being in the environment, the urban environment that we live in, and some of the pressures and challenges that the environment imposes upon the campus, we really want to take a different look, a fresher look. So I think if you want to Google, there's a paradigm around the blue zones is one example. We're not going to turn into a blue zone necessarily, but I think it's a great example of figuring out why certain people have longevity, certain cultures appear to be healthier or more balanced, or whatever frame you want to put on it. And we're trying to adapt all of these lessons learned and really change the campus to a campus that, instead of wearing you down, grinding you down as a student, as a faculty, as a staff, which is notoriously what the perception and probably the reality of some of these very elite and high pressure academic and research institutions do. We're flipping that on its head. And I keep asking the question, why can't we create a campus that actually makes you healthier when you leave than when you came? And I really think we can do that. And lastly, and I think this might provide a good segue for Dacher, is that we are really trying, particularly in the mental health side, but all around, to not just be reactive to problems that come up, not over medicalize stress and some of these other things, that we really need to take a different approach there too, and in general a more positive psychology approach. And so Dacher and his team, and really a lot of the kind of leading thinkers in this area, I think have convinced me and convinced others that that doing so will truly result in a healthier campus. I think with that, I'll bounce it to you, Dacher.
Thank you, Guy. Yeah, I suspect you parents out there have heard a lot about happiness. You're probably worried about your kids' happiness. It's been tough on the 20-year-olds during COVID. It took away the kinds of things that are really the kind of the very core soul of their happiness, getting together with friends, being able to go dancing, et cetera. And it's been a hard time, empirical data show. And I want to speak to the very same spirit that Guy just described with respect to physical, serious mental health, with the happiness, wellness side to Berkeley. And I think David would probably attest to this, having been an undergrad here, which is Berkeley's this great mixture. And I think it's a great opportunity of, I think, the most intense academics in the country. I think our undergrads, we don't have soft, easy grading. We have very serious academics. It's hard. There's no doubt. These guys work hard. Our students work hard. At the same time, this isn't a campus that mollycoddles people or just sort of, overly protects you. That you really learn life skills. And those life skills, in my view, are necessarily going to involve a student's thinking about what matters to them, what's meaningful to them, where they find happiness, what in the 19th century people called their soul, right? Like, why are they here? Berkeley undergrads have a very rich set of opportunities to do that. I'm part of a growing network of what's called FAN, or the Flourishing Academic Network. And it has 30, 40 great universities involved, from Stanford to Brown to Wisconsin to Colorado to Washington, UCLA. And there's this huge flourishing Virginia happiness movement. And it already exists, a lot of it here for your students to really get involved in at UC Berkeley. So the Greater Good Science Center, right, is the country's leading place to learn about happiness. Try happiness, do a practice, try a gratitude practice. Our undergrads write essays, they do literature reviews, they get fellowships, they volunteer, right? So that is there as a free resource. There is a lot of teaching that your students can go to. There are classes called decal classes that are student-led. They're brilliant classes. Students are often better teachers than professors. We've got a lot of classes on meditation, happiness, emotional well-being, finding your purpose, that are changing students' lives. Those are there for students to take advantage of. I would really direct your students, or ask your children, are they taking advantage of the incredible cultural traditions that are in the Berkeley area that pertain to wellness? This is a hotspot for yoga, which is a 3,000 or 4,000-year-old tradition. It is a hotspot for meditation. It is a hotspot for restorative justice. It's a hotspot for indigenous contemplative traditions. We're kind of stereotyped for this at UC Berkeley. Oh, it's all meditation and navel gazing. Those are really serious traditions that make you healthier and happier. And I would ask your students, we have classes online. Our physical education department teaches, dance and yoga and meditation. These are serious traditions that a student can really learn about here. And then the final thing that I would really, just be asking your students is the complement to what Guy talked about, which is, this is a remarkable campus. I do exercises with my class. Like, I want you to go outside on campus and take a photograph of something that makes you feel awe. You go outside, you see redwood trees, a stream, etc. It's remarkable. So, they're just the opportunity to hike in the hills, to get to the Sierras, to be outdoors, to study the trees here. It's the idea of the national parks. It has a lot of problems in terms of displacing indigenous people, but the idea is right, which is get out in nature. That was hatched here at UC Berkeley, right? That idea. So what your students have the chance for, and you should be asking them about, is all this interesting coursework on wellness, right? What about the Greater Good Science Center? You know, have you tracked their stuff? Are there things in the community that you can build into your busy life, like a regular yoga practice or a meditation class? Are you getting outdoors? Are you enjoying, you know, I think one of the prettiest campuses in the world. So there's a lot here, and not to mention the music and culture that's about wellness, that we've been at for 30 years more, that is there for our wonderful bears.
Great, thank you. You know, guys, this is great information. You know, our students. So talk about our students and what they should do if they're having a hard time. Who can they go see? Where can they go see it? What do they look at online, and how do they get themselves placed into the right care? Because I think that's the next step, yeah, in this conversation.
Yeah, it's a great question. My first answer, the top of mind answer, is that's what the Dean of Students office does. Is they're very good at connecting students with specific issues to the resources that likely have the best chance of helping them through that issue. My hope is, well, let me say it this way, that at UHS, you will see in our strategic plan that we're really trying to develop a no wrong door approach. You come in any door in UHS, and we will internally try to connect you to the right resource without, nope, call us back or make another appointment because you came in the wrong door. And I really see that as a mission for campus. And at the student affairs level, the divisional level, I know that's what we're trying to set up, is that a student either self-identifies that they're having this problem, or you know, is referred by somebody else, an RA, a friend, whomever, a parent, and we really have an interconnected hub of no wrong doors. The Dean of Students really is, you know, not only in theory, but I think in actuality a very core part of that hub. And then, of course, there are, if the student doesn't feel comfortable with that, there are just a host of online resources, and I'm sure we'll populate links into this session about connecting with individual things if the student or somebody knows a little bit more precisely what they may need, or at least a first step. And lastly, I'd say, and I'd love to hear Dacher's take on this, that, you know, the faculty here are really engaged on this and in this. And I think rather than, what I hear from faculty is not, hey, take care of this for me because I've got teaching to do. What they really ask or say is, I really want to help. How can I best help, knowing that, you know, I don't have all the resources, or I don't have the things at my fingertips. What do I do? What should I do for this situation or for that situation? And so I think you'll find that all aspects of the campus truly want to help, and we just need to keep building those links between the hubs. Again, no wrong doors. And so we've developed things like what we call the gold folder, you know, kind of a list so that faculty have at their fingertips a few questions to ask to try to help sort out what's going on there to help their student, and then connect them to the right resource, or if there really is an urgent issue, how to get somebody there urgently. Dacher, you probably have more to say because your class and classes are so in demand. You teach thousands and thousands of students.
Yeah, thank you, Guy. It really, such rich opportunities. Yeah, you know, I mean, David, I'm a parent of you know, Berkeley undergrad, and then a young woman in her 20s who's just entered into the workforce. And, you know, it's a hard time. And I think parents have to engage in these conversations a little bit more assertively than if it wasn't pandemic, right? We have to be getting a sense of how our students are doing. A lot of the parents out there may be surprised by this phenomenon of like, God, when I went to college, I didn't talk to my parents at all, and now our kids need us, you know, and it's been a hard time. There are estimates that anxiety and depression are up worldwide 25% from COVID. right? It's clear. CDC data show that. And so I think, the first thing, just intuitively, just to connect your students and you to the kinds of services that Guy is building in a pioneering way at Berkeley. The first thing I think you really need to grapple with is like, is my child, is their anxiety or whatever the condition is it disruptive, right? And just keep an eye on that, make sure they're getting to class, doing the kinds of things that are right for their daily life. And there are great services for students to just grapple with the anxiety of COVID, grapple with feeling a little blue about not seeing their friends, or maybe feeling like they lost a year of college, which is cherished. So that's a good question to keep in mind. How disrupted are they? And then you would go to therapy. If I have students in my class and I feel like they're not sleeping right and not doing their work, that's my first recommendation. But there's a lot of other stuff to be thinking about. And as I love the finding that young brains don't fully mature or really mature until you're about 25, and you're still waiting for the areas of reason to kick in. And so you parents out there probably feel like, God, my kids do the weirdest things, And so when I get parents who call me and they say, man, my 19-year-old is really struggling, what do I do? The Science of Happiness says just 3 things that you can ask them or just softly recommend. The first is just get out and be social, right? Being social adds 10 years to your life expectancy. That's 300,000 participants in a meta-analysis. And so I ask students like, are you having a lunch with friends? Why not go to the football game where David used to play, right? And get out and be around some people, go for a walk with some friends. Nothing better to do. So you want to be just keeping an eye on and being, just throwing out suggestions about making sure they're having that social part of the experience. It's in some ways the most important thing they do at college is to be with their peers and friends. Second thing is, just be asking them, hey, or listening for, where are you finding your joys at Berkeley? I recently was, actually Carol Christ, our chancellor, is very interested in this, and she invited me to her cabinet. And here's an exercise I did. I said, tell me about something that filled you with awe about being at Berkeley. And out came these stories. And I bet if I asked David and Guy and Kaylin, our student, they'd be like, oh my God, well, Jennifer Doudna, the Nobel Prize, or, the band before the football game, or these trees, or the light, or the sunsets. Just check in with your students about, what they're grateful for, what they're finding inspiring. It's core and it's there for them. And then I really, especially right now, I think part of what Berkeley students learn is how to handle the real stresses of adult living. This is an intense school. There are a lot of people here. It's sometimes hard to find housing. It's, we have students who are hungry. It's the real world. And so what we need as adults is just one way to find some calm, right? Because you may face economic pressures or a hard time in a family life or whatever the case, or a hard time at work. So ask your students, like, where are they finding some calm? Is it sitting outdoors and writing in a journal? Is it making sure you watch a Netflix show with some friends, right? Is it going to one of the meditation classes? So if you can just keep an eye on their social life, not obviously in an intrusive way, but just making sure they're not writing code all the time. If you can ask them about their delights and where they're finding it. And if you just make sure that they're building something. If I asked David and Guy, they would probably say, yeah, I find my calm in, exercise or walking outdoors in the woods or whatever it is. Make sure your students are doing that too, because they work hard here. And for that work, Greater Good in Action, ggia.berkeley.edu, is a place that anyone can go, where they can try stuff to find calm and connect to other people. And I have thousands of students try it out. It's just a lot of good stuff to build this life philosophy at Berkeley that is a perfect place for its growth. So that's what I kind of encourage. And it's what I've been doing with my own daughters and my own self during COVID, which has been hard.
Oh, that's great. You know what? And it's true. When I get stressed at work, I take a walk around the campus. Just today, I walked over to the Campanile because we opened the Campanile, and I have 3 students there, and we just talked about the Campanile. They went up, they got the view, they thought it was phenomenal, and every student can go up to the Campanile for free. All they got to do is show their ID card, and away you go. It's a great way to just in between classes, just go up and see a great view. As a matter of fact, there was probably 50 of them that went yesterday because the Campanile is back open. One other thing I wanted to add to that is that if you find that your student has offered you information about themselves and you don't think that they're doing well, you can always call me or send me an email, and I will just try to put you in touch with the sources for your student to go and connect with. We do have a student of concern opportunity for all of us who think that a student might need a wellness call, and so just let us know, and we'll put that in the file and in the case, and somebody will give them a call and just check in on them, make sure they're okay. Now that's not if they're having a hard week because of midterms. It's that you've heard something that you have not heard before, and it's great. I mean, there's a lot of resources here. We want to make sure that your student gets in touch with them, and Guy and Dacher are great resources. So next, I wanted to ask, so hey, my student is feeling sick. That can mean a lot of things these days. How do we go about making the difference between a cold, flu, or COVID? I'm gonna send it to you, Guy.
Yeah, I'll happy to take that one. Well, a very common occurrence, especially right now as we enter kind of what we used to call cold and flu season. I don't know what we're going to call it moving forward. Maybe we'll revert. Here are some facts, if that helps parents out there, and then we'll provide some links, because really the real answer is no health service could see everybody that has a cold and feel like we're keeping up with everything else. So and we none of us run to the doctor the first time that we have a sore throat or a cold. So 95% of the people that we see, 95% of the students that we see with symptoms that might be COVID turn out not to be COVID. Said another way, only 5% of the people that we see ultimately have COVID with those symptoms. So more than likely, if there are symptoms, unless it's loss of smell and taste, which is kind of unique to this particular coronavirus, or at least it's it has a higher percentage of folks with that symptoms than others. If it's typical cold symptoms, likely they have a cold. There is a link that will be posted that kind of helps students and parents and whoever else wants to kind of step through their symptoms and what to do, what the next steps are. And what we've heard is the students have found that very, very helpful. So kind of a how-to guide. What they shouldn't do is another thing. So what we've been promoting on this campus, and the faculty senate, the provost even has really been incredibly supportive of this. If somebody has symptoms, we do not want them mixing with other folks unless we're sure that it's not a contagious illness. This actually we want the same thing for influenza. That was a harder sell back then, is we really want to shut down the transmission of influenza by allowing policies that allow for remote learning or all these other things. even more important in COVID, particularly in the midst of the pandemic. When it turns endemic, we may have other responses to this, but what we don't want is folks headed in to mix with large groups of people if they are symptomatic. That's what spawns some clusters and outbreaks that might have been preventable. What else don't we want them to do? Don't walk immediately to get healthcare without calling or connecting online, because there are some easy ways to sort yourself. And the last thing we want is for somebody that doesn't have COVID to come down to a site where there are a lot of people actually with COVID and catch COVID trying to assess whether they have it. So we've designed systems to try to help people on the front end have a little bit higher pretest probability if they have it or not, and whether they really need to access care or not. Again, we're not going to turn anybody away, but it really does help prevent this, mitigate the spread if we're helping people sort early on. And then lastly, what we don't want people to do is go to the emergency room unless you need emergency care. If you need emergency care, if there's something that concerning, please obviously help your student or help them get to emergency care. But most of the time, these illnesses, even COVID, for a young, relatively healthy person, are not an emergent situation. And again, the last thing we want them to do is go into an environment where there are other things that they would be exposed to. And so we have 24/7 nurse advice lines, and we have an on-call system. So your student can call and we will help route them the best we can on the telephone. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. We will help them sort out what the next steps are. And then if reasonable, we'll get set up for an appointment the following day. So that's my answer right now. Things are evolving quite a bit. Oh, the other thing that I should have mentioned is there is a dashboard for folks that want to understand the burden of COVID on campus and what the trends are. Early on in the pandemic, people were refreshing this thing more often than it was updated. They were refreshing it 3 and 4 and 5 times a day. I would encourage you not to do that. It only changes once a day as the test information comes in. And frankly, there's a risk to that too. To speak to Dacher's, stress and the environment that we live in, it's normal to have stress and it's normal to be worried about COVID, and that's okay. The last thing I want a dashboard to do with the intent of giving transparency and information is to unnecessarily or overly worry folks. That's not the intent. And so if your student is really getting concerned about the number of cases or what the positivity rate is, and it seems that they're overly concerned, we want to help with that, and certainly kind of focusing on gratitude and awe, and really just have them take the Science of Happiness course. I took it; it's amazing. And let's reframe this a little bit, because while we are in a pandemic and this isn't a perfect world, again, we are just not seeing thousands and thousands of cases, and we don't have this incredibly high positivity rate, and things are kind of where they should be at this stage in the pandemic. I'll say. I'll stop talking because I could go on for way too long.
Thanks for that. And on that same note, you find that, like, yes, Cal is a stressful place, and it's very challenging. We have we have awesome students and awesome professors, but they like to challenge our students to make sure that they are at the highest level when they are leaving Berkeley. But add in the pandemic, you now have some stressful times where students are stressing not only on classes, but also just walking down the street, wondering how do they stay safe. Dacher, can you give us a little bit of, with all that, what techniques would you suggest to alleviate stress, or how can students help themselves with this issue?
Yeah, I think that we have undergone really one of the more radical experiments in the last several hundred years, right? Which is this lockdown and isolation in pods. And as Guy's data suggests, Berkeley and California, parts of California have done well, and we're in a good place. Still vulnerable, but that's good news. But there are costs to that, to this, and particularly felt by our 20-year-olds and our students. I really think, the 20s are a period of, in some sense, setting some patterns that are, important to our stress and well-being. One is sleep. Matt Walker, our professor here at Berkeley, really has changed the world by saying, make sure our sleep is healthy. Find the nap if you need it. Make sure that you're building. So point one is that. I think, again, I will return to 25 years of lived experience at Berkeley, which is we should, our students should really, they work hard and they should complement that with a healthy social life. They should be doing walks with friends, getting lunches with friends, taking extra outdoor classes with friends, right? A dance class or whatever it is. Just to remind our students, there are a lot of great dance groups around campus that get together, on different parts of our campus and do their Michael Jackson moves or whatever it is. So that's, make sure that they do that. For me, one of the simplest ways to build health is to get outdoors, is to make sure, every few hours your students just say the words, get outdoors, go for a walk on campus, go for a walk in the hills, sit in the sunshine. We know that's good for you. So I feel as we transition out of COVID, and the Greater Good Science Center provides almost daily ideas about what to do, right? Very actionable knowledge. Play a game with friends. Here's how you ask good questions that builds friendship. I think that they really need to be spending 5-10 minutes a day on this array of things that can rebuild their healthy relationships to the world. And we thankfully here at Berkeley have this tremendous resource for free to do that. And a lot of our students use it, and I hope parents out there, their students do too.
David, I want to highlight a point. It probably doesn't need highlighting because he's a great professor, but sleep, other than choosing to be happy, sleep is one thing that it's free. It's absolutely a free treatment. And it's one thing that really I could find a few medical exceptions, but 99.999% of people will be healthier if they sleep the way their body needs it. And to be all, kind of the medical side is, 5 stages, 5 cycles of REM sleep. That's kind of a rough guide for most people. And everybody's a little different. So I don't want to use hours, and I don't want to use, but the point is, if we could get our students, frankly, our faculty and staff, and myself, to sleep the way our body needs to, that's when you repair. So the physical side, you repair your body when you sleep. Your brain, you repair your brain, and you consolidate experiences and memories and really work through problems during sleep. If you can do one thing, it's sleep. So we couldn't say it enough. You, as a parent, you could, I've got a 4-year-old, so that's a little tougher, but you could almost answer I've got a problem with, and more sleep probably would help. Now, obviously, we don't want to minimize, there are other things going on and other ways to help, but sleep is that critical.
And David, can I just say one thing?
Absolutely.
Guy's conversation around this, it's hard for parents of 20-year-olds to engage in these conversations, right? They're becoming their own independent beings. They're developing their identities. They're breaking away from parents, but they need us. It's this complicated dynamic, I think, intensified during COVID. And I hope this conversation, I struggle talking about mental health and wellness with my daughters, right? Because they're figuring out their lives. And I think this conversation just gives parents some anchor points, right? You can ask your child, hey, how are you sleeping? Right? And you may hear, oh, I get to bed at 4, you know, and then you should be thinking about that. You can ask them, you know, who are your friends? Who are you getting out and seeing a movie with, or whatever the case may be. Those are portals or entryways into things you can suggest or point to that Guy and I have been talking about on this conversation together. So I think it's just a time where we need to embrace these conversations with our youngsters, because it's a big transition they're making.
David, we're just gonna keep adding on to one another's answers. Sorry, because I know that there's probably more parent questions that were submitted, but if there's one piece of advice that I have for parents that's outside of the medical field is to look up to, if you're not already a skilled motivational interviewer, that motivational interviewing will teach people skills, not only in the workplace, which is what it was designed to do, and certainly in the clinical workspace, but also as a parent. So just a one-off recommendation that if you're interested in how to think about your interactions with your student, particularly when they're away from home for the first time, or a longer distance than ever before, this may help you as a parent, and certainly your goal is to help your child too.
And I know when we have our orientation for parents, we talk a lot about communication. We talk a lot about how your student better than anybody. Yeah. So you can know when they're triggered, you can know when they're happy, when they're sad, or what have you. But you can also ask some questions that might lead to them, having that conversation about the issues at hand. So it's really important to have a communication plan in which you can always adhere to, whether it's Sunday night, or my daughter, she's away at college right now, and she's calling me every time she walks to class, which I've heard is a very common technique for most students. And we get to know what's going on with her. And so when there's something really bugging her, we know what's up. We can ask those questions. And then if something is needed, we go to, we ask her at first how she can deal with it, and allow her the opportunity for self-care. And then we go, if she doesn't know where to go for any of this, then we might help by calling the university or just looking it up online to find out. So a lot of stuff going on. All right, we got a question in our Facebook live messaging, and I'm going to ask this out to both of you. Young adults are using recreational drugs, have increased on college campuses, especially due to the lockdown. Does Cal have any educational platforms, programs to help students reassess their lifestyles?
Well, certainly through UHS, there's a host of them. Party Safe at Cal, which is centered around alcohol use, but certainly is connected to other drug use. We our health promotion team has regular kind of class work with it. Class meaning kind of group work. So there's just an absolute ton of resources that people can get through the UHS website, particularly on the health promotion side. We have a couple of alcohol and other drug specialists that work with folks in various stages of exploration, even all the way through to addiction. And certainly our psychologic team and social services team work with folks in ways, again, kind of along the spectrum of that exploration or addiction, to try to connect them to healing resources, or at least just to educational programs available to them, usually free.
Dacher, what do you got anything to say on this one?
Yeah, I really appreciate the parent asking the question. I think it's one of these domains of life that our students are figuring out, right? They are drinking and they are smoking marijuana and et cetera. And I think it's the kind of question of the kind we've been talking about this hour together, of sleep and getting out and seeing friends, where you're allowed, you should be checking in with your kids, right? And asking, you know, are you socializing? What do you think about the alcohol use on campus or whatever? And then, as Guy said, there are clear ways to guide students if they're drinking a little too much, for example, to introspect and to take stock of their behavior, and to deal with it. And it's just part of growing up, is to kind of be self-aware as we transition to adulthood.
Completely agree. And let me throw some data at folks, that if this is any of any reassurance, that the American College Health Association every year has a massive survey. Many universities take part of this survey called the National Collegiate Health Assessment, or NCHA data. That data is publicly available. Particularly years past, they don't make the current year available, or you got to pay for it. Well, we pay for ours, and here's what it says: that students' perception of other students is that everybody's drinking and everybody's using some sort of recreational drug. But what the same students taking that survey, it's 1/6 of the percentage of people that are actually say that they're doing that. So I think, not to minimize the challenge that this causes, and there are some just truly tragic consequences to families and students. But taken kind of a 10,000-foot view, that this problem isn't as widespread as the students think it is, and therefore I do think parents probably get a skewed view of how prevalent or not that it is. Some people ignore it and don't think it's a problem. Well, there certainly is alcohol and other drug use on campuses. But to say that, half of students use regularly, some is simply not true based on our data, and that's years and years of data.
Yeah, and I'll say, I have to weigh in. I mean, I think probably the central issue facing our Berkeley undergrads is they work too hard. I've taught for 30 years. I've taught at great universities, and it's great that they work hard, and they are, when I travel the world, I go to places like Google, I bump into Berkeley undergrads, or, my medical doctors are Berkeley undergrads. They know how to work, but it's the drug use here is not as big a problem as perception would hold at all.
Great. That was a great question. Thank you for
absolutely,
for the parent that offered that. Want to get into professors, and you touched on it a little bit before, Dacher, but can you talk specifically about how professors see mental health, and if they have accommodations, or if DSP is involved, or what have you? How do professors deal with those issues as they go through their class?
Yeah, I mean, Guy said this earlier, Berkeley professors are involved with the undergrads. Most of our departments, most of us teach a lot compared to peer institutions. We love our teaching. There are phenomenal courses on campus. We have students in our labs, and I'd really recommend the parents out there to suggest to their students to get connected to a professor in research. I usually have 20 to 30 undergrads in my lab going on. We have the highest rate of students going to grad school, I think, in the country, because of professors' involvement in the well-being of their students. It's letter writing season, and I'm writing a ton of letters of recommendation for all kinds of spectacular undergrads. But in the class, I teach classes of 300 to 500 or 600, and still, I've got a team of GSIs, right? And one of the first things that we are building campus-wide is how to stay in touch with the well-being of your student, right? What if they start to really have anxiety attacks and need some therapy? So we have systems in place that are really being built into all classes about keeping an eye on our students, even large classes. You know, I like a lot of faculty, Berkeley undergrads are, you know, I don't know if you were like this when you were a student, David, but they follow you across campus. They want to talk about the class. They are engaged. And so, you know, I usually know a lot of my students, where they're at, what their trajectories are. Encourage your students to go to office hours. You know, professors love talking to students about in office hours. And through these ways, you know, and we also look at grading. And if I see a student who, you know, is really below expectation, I'm reaching out like, hey, you know, and often it's something happened in the family, a grandmother died, or, you know, so there are a lot of ways in which we are making contact with them. And the students should really be coming back to us, introduce themselves, talk a little bit about the content of the course. Get your students to talk to us.
Guy?
Well, I don't have a ton to add. I know that, and I agree with everything that Dacher said, that what we're trying to do from the UHS side is help particularly newer instructors and lecturers by building a healthy academic toolkit that again, kind of gives some tools to folks that are less experienced, or, you know, just kind of want to reconnect with not only what resources do we have on this campus, but what are just some general principles of dealing with students in distress. I think we're trying to train GSIs and you know, graduate student folks, again, because they would be relatively new instructors and new in the kind of teaching realm, about what resources exist specific to their situation, and again, just how to help a student work through an issue and have some sort of understanding of the level of distress and what the general options are. Again, not to become a trained therapist, but just to be able to support. And lastly, or not lastly, but another thing that we're doing is really working on our connection to peer counseling units. So students have done this for years, unsupported. They just want to be part of solutions. And whether or not they're going into a mental health related profession, I think there's just groups of students that want to help their fellow student. And we've just taken up the challenge in the past couple of years to find the right level of connection to the trained therapists and mental health professionals that we have, without overstepping or kind of inserting ourselves unnecessarily into this peer counseling, but provide support for those that feel the call to be a peer counselor, and provide not only backup, but even training and support for their work and what they are obviously passionate to do, because they're just doing it on their own. So I'd say these are kind of some of the structures that we're fostering. I'm not going to claim that we're building everything, but we're certainly fostering and helping encourage this, because this is a campus-wide issue to really support folks' mental health challenges. I'll circle back around to one of the first things that one of us said. I've even forgotten who said it. It was probably smart, so it probably wasn't me, but that stress is part of the campus experience. It's part of the university experience. This campus is not immune to it. In fact, probably given its rigor, induces more than the average bear, pun intended, I guess. And that we really want a campus-wide perspective to solving these problems. It shouldn't just be, well, go speak to a therapist. You know, we've got all of these other things in place, like peer counseling, like faculty that really care, like the dean of students, and we're really doing this as a community. I'll stop abruptly.
Well, we have a couple minutes left, so I'd like for both of you to go to talk specifically about, as parents, um, what, last statement about their students' wellness and health. How can we help them? Parting knowledge.
Yeah, it's what I'll say is, let them know that you're around. Build up rhythms like David referred to with his daughter of connecting, the regular call once a week or whatever it is. It's one of the great challenges where you have to allow them to struggle on their own. That is a very important part of gaining the skills to make it in our world and the insights and just stepping back and sort of reflecting like, this is something, they've got structures in place, she can make it or he can make it. And then finally, I would say, get involved in the Berkeley experience. This is an amazing place for parents to come visit, to go see an art exhibit or come visit a class. I have parents coming to my class all the time, see a football game, whatever, just softly be involved in this campus too, to make your students feel like it's a family experience, because it's a great family, the Cal community. So stay involved, let them know you're there, but let them grow.
I don't want to follow that, but I guess I have to. The only thing that I would add, okay, so maybe I'll just be a little provocative. In a long time in collegiate health, what I've experienced, and I think this would hold true, that for the most part, if the parents are happy, usually the student is happy and can has the support and the ability to kind of, as Dacher said, that struggle is the struggle is part of this. And so why don't all the parents think about I'll keep plugging Greater Good Science Center. Why don't the parents investigate happiness through either the Greater Good Science Center or other resources?
Yeah.
Be happy. I'll don't know why I should close on that, but I will.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you too. You for giving us your time and your expertise and the background on all that we're doing on our campus. I am an alum, and I stressed out when necessary and had a good time when necessary. And my son, in his experience, I found it to be the same. That the stress and I had to learn as a parent. Being on campus, I was so accessible to him, but I had to allow him to fall down, not do well on a test because he wasn't doing the right things, and him learning for himself that what he needed to do and just explain that to me, and then never had a problem again. Because when they pick themselves up, they remember it, and it's part of who they become. And I'm so grateful for how independent my son is leaving Berkeley, and how that changed from his freshman year to his senior year, and knowing his cluster of friends and all those great pals he has, how they are phenomenal humans, and just everybody that the people he has been involved in. Not to say that it's not the same at all the schools that I've talked to, and my students who my children who have gone to different schools, they have great friends as well. Everything's phenomenal. However, some of the kids from here are doing things that are like, wow, I would, things that I wouldn't have thought of. So it's great. It's great. And I want to thank you too for enlightening us and being there for the parents so that they can have an understanding of how their students' wellness and well-being is really important to all of us on our campus. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for all your time and effort. And parents, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. And we will have another Facebook Live in December, and it will be with our UC Police Department, talking about safety and safe care for our students. Okay. Thank you very much, Guy and Dacher. You guys are fantastic, and go Bears.
Good.